Good afternoon. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 1:34 p.m. First roll call, Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Flick, present. Commissioner Joshi Gupta.
Present.
Commissioner Lunn.
Present.
Commissioner Stieg.
Here.
Commissioner Stewart.
Present.
Thank you. First, we'll go through the approval of the meeting minutes from the March 14th, March 28th, and April the 11th. Looking for a motion?
I'll move approval.
Thank you.
Second by Commissioner Stewart.
Commissioner Brown made a motion for approval of the minutes, seconded by Commissioner Stewart. If there's no discussion, we'll call a question. Please vote your machines. Motion to approve passes. Now I'm going to read the formal public hearing rules. The City Planning Commission has established certain rules governing the procedures to be followed at public hearings. Before speaking, each person shall give their name, address, and state whom he or she is representing. Proponents for the proposal will speak first for a period of 10 minutes. Each speaker shall be allowed a maximum of 2 minutes. Opponents or other interested parties will speak second for a period of 15 minutes. Each speaker shall be allowed a maximum of 2 minutes. Proponents will be allowed a period of 6 minutes for rebuttal. Each speaker shall be allowed a maximum of 2 minutes. Opponents will not be allowed to rebut. No material, written matter, photographs, maps, etc. will be accepted by the commission or its staff at any time during this public hearing. This procedure shall be followed except at such time when the presiding officer shall, with the approval of the commission members present, extend such time. And with that, we'll start our first zoning docket, 1223.
The City Council recently passed motion M 2312 in response to a sharp increase in vehicular crimes occurring primarily in parking facilities in the Central Business District and the periphery of the French Quarter during major events such as Saints and Pelicans home games. This motion directs the City Planning Commission to explore the efficacy of amending the use standards for Article 20, Sections 2300, 23001, and 23002, as well as any related regulations to add crime mitigation measures such as parking attendants, panic buttons, and/or lighting alterations. Currently, parking lots and lighting are addressed in multiple sections throughout the CZO. However, it should be noted that all current regulations pertaining to parking lots, lighting, and/or landscaping are only applicable to new parking and are not applied retroactively to facilities that may predate the current ordinance. In considering its recommendation, staff reviewed literature on the subject of parking lot management and crime mitigation to determine best practices and determine how those practices might fit into the comprehensive zoning ordinance, which is first and foremost a land use and urban design document, not a law enforcement document. In its assessment of the literature, staff found that crime mitigation practices are typically broken into two basic categories: passive measures and active measures. Passive measures are typically proactive and aim to mitigate the likelihood of crime before it occurs. These methods include incorporating design features that clearly define a space, such as fencing, curb cuts, and landscaping, adequate lighting, and the active maintenance of a space. Active measures are typically reactionary and offer responses to crime after they occur. Active measures may include panic buttons, on-site security personnel, and video surveillance. While the CZO is best suited to provide for passive measures, staff notes that there is a precedent for some active security measures in the CZO. Examples of active security measures in the CZO include the requirement for security and operations plans and exterior surveillance, which is a requirement in the use standards for bars, amusement parks, and restaurants. To better understand the current parking conditions as they relate to industry best practices, staff worked with the crime analysis unit of the NOPD to obtain a data set of vehicular crimes from January 2022 to February 2023. For the purpose of this analysis, vehicular crime was defined here as incidents occurring to vehicles, such as theft, as well as the theft of the vehicles themselves. The NOPD data set totaled over 3,000 incidents throughout the subject area. Using this data set, staff was able to determine parking facilities it deemed to be most vulnerable to these crimes based on the volume of repeat incidents. Figure 1 and Figure 2 in the report provide the spatial distribution of vehicular crime. And on Table 1, you'll see a list of the 20 facilities deemed most vulnerable, which staff uses as a proxy to study the greater parking safety issue. You'll see that patterns emerge regarding their conditions, with poor lighting being the most common denominator. Most of the vulnerable lots were surface lots rather than garages, and all surface lots were deficient of parking lot related regulations in the CZO, including landscape requirements. These lots also often feature poorly defined space, and while many do include fencing, the fencing was often substandard, including poorly maintained single link style chain fencing noted in Figure 4 of the staff report. It's notable that most, if not all, of the vulnerable facilities in staff analysis precede current parking and lighting regulations in the CZO. While the CZO currently includes many regulations that are in keeping with crime mitigation and design best practices, including Article 23.7, which outlines parking, landscaping, and fencing requirements, the city is unable to enforce those regulations on many of the largest and most problematic surface lots. However, staff did find that areas for improvement in the current use and lighting standards. Staff recommends modified approval of the requested text amendment, including amending Article 23.00.1 parking structure use standards to include a security and operations plan to be approved by safety and permits, as well as an exterior and interior security cameras. Amending Article 23.001 parking lots use standards to include security and operations plan and exterior security cameras, excuse me. Staff also recommends amending the lighting standards in Article 22, Section 22HG to require one shielded lighting fixture for every 10 spaces in compliance with the current light trespass regulations in Article 21.5. Staff believes that these amendments are currently the best option to address public safety concerns while keeping with the intent of the CZO as a land use and design document.
Thank you. As this is a city council motion, I typically don't have an applicant. Is there anyone here to speak on behalf or in support?
And I intended to mention that the attorney for many of the parking lot operators in the city did email us on Friday afternoon requesting a deferral so they can prepare a response. You do have one more deferral available, so just FYI.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to speak in support? If not, I have one card in opposition. Missy Quigley.
Hello, commissioners. Nice to see you. Missy Quigley, 800 Barone. Thank you, staff, for your great report. I'm not speaking in opposition. I'm asking for a deferral, as he said. We represent some of the biggest parking lot operators in the city, and the staff report just came out late last week. We haven't had time to digest it. We want to get together and kind of go into what should go into those security and operation plans. And also, because it doesn't really affect non-conforming lots, we want to try to see about voluntary compliance, because anytime they're going to get renovated, they will have to come into compliance. So it's better to do it on the front end. So we just ask that you defer it one more meeting.
Thank you. So we're good to go just the next meeting, the first weekend, May.
Yeah, May 9th.
May 9th. Looking for a motion for deferral.
Motion for deferral for one meeting.
A second.
Motion for deferral recommended by Commissioner Sieg, seconded by Commissioner Joshi Gupta. If there's no discussion, we'll call the question. Motion passes. Next is zoning docket 1823.
Zoning docket 1823 is a request to amend the text of the comprehensive zoning ordinance to amend Article 19 to establish a new interim zoning district to be named Bed and Breakfast Interim Zoning District. The intent of which is to ensure that bed and breakfasts are compatible with and preserve the character and integrity of the neighborhood citywide, while the impacts of short-term rental regulations are studied. This IZD operates under the presumption that owners will attempt to convert their short-term rentals into bed and breakfasts. The IZD will establish all bed and breakfasts as conditional uses until the impacts of short-term rentals and their relationships to bed and breakfast are better understood. This would impact Articles 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 17 of the comprehensive zoning ordinance. Staff recommends approval of zoning docket 1823.
Thank you. I have two cards. Leslie Davis. Oh, I see. Thank you. David Garrity. Subdivision docket. Thank you. I have no cards on this docket item. So if there's any questions for staff. Or a motion. Is there any discussion or questions?
I move approval in accordance with staff recommendation.
Second by Commissioner Stewart.
If there's no discussion, we'll call the question. Please vote your machines. Motion passes. Next is zoning docket 2123.
Zoning docket 2123 is a request for a conditional use to permit a reception facility in an HMC2 Historic Marigny Treme Bywater Commercial District. The property is currently developed with a single structure that encompasses the entirety of the site. The building historically accommodated 6 individual tenant spaces. The reception facility would be located in 2 of the tenant spaces, 1830 and 1832 North Claiborne Avenue. The total square footage of the reception facility would be approximately 1,900 square feet in area. The remaining 4 tenant spaces are excluded from the proposal and will continue to operate independently of the reception facility. The applicant is not proposing any renovations to the exterior of the structure and will not be providing off-street parking. The proposal of a reception facility in this location should have minimal impact on the surrounding properties, which are largely utilized commercially or are vacant lots. The property itself is located along a heavily trafficked corridor that spans the length of the city. In addition, a reception facility of this site would arguably have less impact than other permitted by right uses in the HMC2 district, which include hotels, microbreweries, minor motor vehicle repair shops, and commercial short-term rentals. The staff finds that the proposed use meets the standards for approval in Article 4 of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance and is consistent with the master plan. The staff recommends approval of zoning docket 2123, subject to 5 provisos.
Thank you. I have a few cards. First is Deona January. Please just state your name and address, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Afternoon, Deanna January, address 1832 North Claiborne Avenue, New Orleans, Louisiana, 70116.
Go ahead if you have any comments.
How you doing? I am a owner of, me and my husband are owner of A Fresh Food Assassins. We have a restaurant right in the next block from the facility. So we are trying to open up a banquet facility for memorable milestones, weddings, to host community events. We actually have 7 young adults who work underneath us. And we hired them, we took them off the street and hired them. We get a lot of younger adults to come in for job and we can't hire them because we don't have enough rooms to put them underneath our roof, employ them. So we're gonna bring back to the community job placements, job training, and different type of, we're gonna add amenities to the community.
And have you reviewed the report and you're fine with the provisos as stated?
excuse me?
And you've reviewed the report and you're okay with the provisos as stated?
Pretty much. Yeah,
Great. Thank you.
thanks.
Darielle King.
Good evening, Board. Darrell King, 1517 Harrison Avenue, New Orleans, Louisiana. Nice to see y'all all again. I am also the community liaison for my family members in this venture. I ask you humbly to accept this and approve this motion. Not only are we putting a building that was not in commerce or tax writing for many years, we are putting it back into taxes on a tax roll. We're hiring minority youth, and we're going to be giving back to the community. As far as safety wise, we already have a security plan in process with a security company that I own. And my cousins, as they say, we are very entrenched in the 7th Ward area in all aspects, from my father, their uncle being the second line king, and my uncle being state senator and state representative. So once again, I ask you that you please accept this and allow us to give back to the community in this form of matter. Thank you.
Thank you. And one final card, Emmanuel January.
May January 1900 North Claiborne Avenue. They already touched on most of everything, but like my wife said, we own a restaurant right next door to A Fresh Food Assassin, restaurant and lounge. And we just moving into the opportunity to show what we can provide to the community. So I've been at Galatoire's restaurant 17 years, and we have a chance to move on our own and do things that we've been wanting to do. Dreams are finally coming true. So I also ask that you guys accept this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Those are all the cards that I have. Just to state for the record that Commissioner Steig has recused himself. If there are any questions of the commission for staff or a motion.
I'll move for recommending approval of zoning docket 2123, subject to 5 provisos that are in the staff report.
Brown will second.
Commissioner Lund made a motion for approval, seconded by Commissioner Brown. And if there's no discussion, we'll vote our machines. Great. Motion passes. Best of luck.
Thank you so much, committee. And in the future, just to let you know, the Lawless alumni have something coming for the whole committee in about a month or two.
Next up is zoning, no subdivision docket 3023.
Subdivision docket 3023 is a request to create 6 new lots of record that will be developed with single or 2-family dwellings. The 3 existing subject properties are zoned HUMU, Historic Urban Mixed Use District, and they feature frontage along Flood Street, but the 6 proposed lots will have frontage along South Peter Street, which is the reason why this request must be heard by the CPC. In the HUMU district, there's no minimum depth requirement for any use. Single and 2-family dwellings require a minimum lot width of 25 feet. Single family dwellings require at least 1,500 square feet of lot area. 2-family dwellings require a minimum lot area of 2,400 square feet. Each of the 6 proposed lots has at least 4,351 square feet and is at least 34 feet wide. So they are all compliant with the HUMU area and width requirements. As previously mentioned, the proposal at hand will result in one of the conditions listed in section 581 of the subdivision regulations, namely rear yards abutting side yards, that are generally regarded with disfavor by the Planning Commission. It should be noted, however, that the condition already exists with the subject properties. The rear yards of existing lots 13, 14, and D all abut the side yard of 5435 North Peter Street. In fact, this lot arrangement is exceedingly common in Holy Cross, where an overwhelming majority of the lots near the subject property feature side and rear yards abutting each other. The subject property bears a future land use designation of mixed use, mixed density, where the range of uses includes single and two-family dwellings, which is the development plan for the proposed lots. Accordingly, the staff finds that the proposal is consistent with the objectives of the master plan, and therefore staff recommends tentative approval of subdivision docket 3023, subject to 6 provisos.
Thank you. I have one card, Joseph Levine.
My name is Joseph Levine, reside at 3700 North Rampart Street, New Orleans. I represent my brother and I who are.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go.
Too
Thank
tall
you.
for me. I'm sorry. Should I repeat or are we okay? Our hope and desire for this project was to develop these sites that are a replication of what was there historically. There were lots that faced the river and all homes that faced the river, where North Rampart Street was out further into the river, not North Peters. And the levee had been moved back in 1900, right around then. And they demolished all those houses that faced the river. This is an attempt to kind of replicating that original historic layout and to restore a more residential aspect to the sites. And we both plan to build our own homes on each one of the sites. So we ask your approval.
Thank you so much. It's the only card that I have for this zoning docket or the subdivision docket. Are there any questions for the applicant or staff or a motion?
I do have one other comment. One of the provisos says that we have to put a sidewalk down the fronts of the sites. There is an existing sidewalk which we will have to tear up in order to put the new water line in, and we will replace the sidewalk. The only question is, as we construct each home, we don't want to put a sidewalk in and then destroy the sidewalk in constructing the home. So we'd like to be able to work out some arrangement with as we do each new home to put the sidewalk in, the final sidewalk. It's just, we hope to coordinate. Same thing with trees. We need to coordinate with Park and Parkway, because there are huge, we have 4-foot and 6-foot diameter oak trees right on the street, and we don't want to put new trees underneath the old trees. So there's just a few items like that that we hope will satisfy everyone's concerns.
And staff were fine with that. Yes, not a problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Motion to approve zoning docket 30-23 with provisos. Motion to approve subdivision docket 3023, subject to 5 provisos, 6 provisos, and 1 waiver.
Looking for a second. Thank you. Commissioner Joshi Gupta made a motion for approval, seconded by Commissioner Brown. There's no discussion. We'll call the question. Motion passes. Best of luck to you. Next is zoning docket 2623.
So 26, 23.
Zoning docket. Zoning docket 2623 is a request by the New Orleans Redevelopment Authority for a zoning change from an HMR2 Historic Marigny Treme Bywater Residential District to an HMC2 Historic Marigny Treme Bywater Commercial District. The request involves 3 lots in the 1600 block of North Robertson Street. These three subject interior lots are part of a larger residential development site that was recently created via a subdivision action. At its December 3rd, 2022 meeting, City Planning Commission granted tentative approval to subdivision docket 14322, with final approval being contingent upon the entire site bearing one uniform zoning classification. To that end, a portion of the subject properties, which are zoned HMR2, must be rezoned to match the HMC2 zoning classification of the larger development. The proposed zoning change will result in the subject development site having a single zoning classification instead of 2. Because the intended use of the entire site is residential and residential uses are permitted in the HMC2 district, the proposed zoning change is appropriate in addition to being a condition of the subdivision's final approval. The allowable ranges of uses in this category includes residential and such as multifamily housing as is proposed for the subject site. Therefore, the request for a zoning change is also consistent with the master plan. Therefore, the staff recommends approval of zoning docket 2623.
Thank you. I have no cards on this docket item. Is no one here to speak on this?
Good afternoon, Chris Clement with HRI Communities. I did not fill out a card. We are the applicant. So I wanted to thank obviously the City Planning Commission and staff for all their time on this and wanted to make sure you know that we're available to answer any questions you may have today.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff or motion?
I move to approve zoning docket 2623, recommend approval of zoning docket 2623 as recommended by staff.
Commissioner Lund made a motion for approval, seconded by Commissioner Stewart. If there's no discussion, we'll call the question. Motion passes. Next up is zoning docket 2723.
Zoning docket 2723 is a request for the rescission of ordinance number 24,145 MCS to grant a conditional use to expand an existing commercial use of over 5,000 square feet. So proper public notice was not provided for this request. Therefore, staff recommends a deferral to the May 9th meeting.
Thank you. Looking for deferral to the May 9th meeting.
I move to defer till the May 9th meeting for zoning docket 2723.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, let's vote on machines. Motion to defer passes. Next is zoning docket 2823.
Zoning docket 2823 is an application to amend restrictions that are attached to live performance at the former Saint Rosa de Lima Church on Bayou Road and Kellerack. In the 7th Ward in 2018, the former church was adapted for use as a performance venue by the Southern Rep Theater. The permission for live performance was allowed by an overlay district that extends along Broad and also this segment of Bayou Road, which allows live performance, but tightly regulates it, only allowing plays and musicals and only allowing alcohol sales about an hour before performance time. After and during the COVID pandemic, the Southern Rep Theater shut down operation. They are being replaced by a new tenant. The new tenant seeks to include a wider range of performances, so not just musicals and plays, but other things that fall within the general live performance definition, but aren't allowed within this overlay district. The tenant also seeks to serve alcoholic beverages through during a wider range of times before and after events to support their business. This requires waivers of the overlay district standards that apply here. Waivers of zoning requirements have to be reviewed against the 9 criteria for variances that are contained in the zoning ordinance, which really set a high bar and look for a demonstration of a hardship and special conditions, among other things, to justify the variance. The staff finds that this flexibility in operation is probably appropriate given the general goals of the district, but finds that it does not meet the 9 criteria. That is very high bar to clear, and the staff cannot conclude that that threshold is met. And so given that, the staff recommends denial of this application.
Thank you. I have 3 cards. First is Robin Vander. And if you could please just state your name and address.
Good afternoon. I am Dr. Robin Vander. My address is 2832 Gentilly Boulevard here in New Orleans. I am one of the co-founders and co-executive directors of the Andre Caillou Center. So can you hear me? Okay. So first, thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of our organization. We are a new organization. We are a nonprofit. One of the things that we're looking to do with the expansion of what is considered live performance is that currently it's only focusing on theater and musicals, whereas for us looking at New Orleans, and we're primarily focusing on New Orleans talent and helping to cultivate New Orleans talent. So we're looking at other types of live performances, including spoken word poetry. We are neighbors with the Community Book Center. We've been able to partner with them previously for events that will focus on literature. But because we are a venue, we're able to also then sort of elevate those experiences in terms of how people understand and engage different types of genres and whatnot. Another aspect is to look at comedians. We have a growing community of comedians who really don't have a space. What we are looking to do with the Andre Caillou Center is literally serve almost as an incubator, if you will, as well as part of our title is cultural justice. One of the things that we're learning is that predominantly artists of color, particularly Black and Brown, don't always have access to viable quality performing arts spaces because they're typically priced out of those venues, whereas we make ourselves very much available and we're community oriented. We have support not simply from our immediate neighbors, but also the Bayou Road Business Association. We also have support from the Waldorf School, as well as further down in the on Esplanade and including Broad Street. So for us to be able to expand how we consider live performance is not simply for us, but also how we open the doors to provide opportunities and access to space to folks who are here, who are contributing to the history and culture and the economy of New Orleans, but at times are financially struggling themselves to have access. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan Lest or Late.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jonathan Light, 2533 Columbus Street. I'm here representing the applicant Bayou Treme Center LLC. Bayou Treme Center is a partnership between Alembic Community Development and Rose Community Development Corporation, which is a nonprofit comprised of community members. We can't disagree with the staff report based on the technical merits of it. We understand that the 9 criteria are a high bar. I think what we're here to discuss with the commission is where we see the CZO getting it wrong in this case in the application of the AC1 overlay. So as discussed, this is a property that we redeveloped with Rose Community Development Corporation back in 2018. And we've been the long-term owner as well. It was originally leased to Southern Rep Theater, who didn't make it through the pandemic. And now we're really excited to partner with Dr. Vander and her partners for the Andre Caillou Center. And importantly, right, this is a community-based operation, it's community-based theater. And as Robin noted, this is the broad support of the Bayou Road community. We've been at every single meeting of the Bayou Road Business Association since its founding back in 2016-17. Our MPP meeting was really widely supported. And so I think that's a really important component of this. This is a proposed amendment to a former conditional use. I want to note that original conditional use was because not for uses to expand those, but it's greater than 10,000 square feet. So we had to do a conditional use to permit a commercial use beyond 10,000 square feet. But now, of course, we are seeking an expansion of uses. So a couple of things about the overlay that I think are interesting. The live performance venue under which we're currently zoned and permitted, as has been noted, is limited to plays and musicals. So these are just 2 potential uses for the broader definition of a live performance venue that is permitted in other places, just not in the AC1 overlay. There are these other permitted uses, though, which are the ones that we're seeking to be applicable here. It's also important to note that live entertainment is permitted in AC1 overlay as well. It's only permitted as a secondary use and only a secondary use to a bar or restaurant. So if I'm understanding it correctly, in our conversations with staff, live entertainment can't be a secondary use to a live performance venue, which is how we would otherwise qualify to do these expanded uses that, again, we feel are appropriate. We would have to recategorize as a restaurant or a bar in order to do live entertainment. And that's obviously not appropriate. That's not what we are. But it just stands to reason that if live entertainment can be a secondary use, it's just not a secondary use to a performance venue. I want to note the location here is pretty important. This is Bayou Road. Hopefully everyone kind of knows Bayou Road, spent time there. This is not a residential district. This is one of the most important streets in our city, and particularly most important streets for Black culture and for a real, the revitalization of Bayou Road has really been community driven and has been really supportive of this effort. It's not a precious place that needs protection from uses that maybe in the original writing of this overlay needed some protection, right? This is a place that has festivals. This is a place that has activity. This is a place where people are on the streets. This is what we should want to happen on Bayou Road. And live music, dance, comedy, those uses are things that are supported here. These uses are not more intense than what's already happening in the theater that's already permitted to happen. There's not going to be more people in the venue as a result of this time. So thank you. The last point I make.
Oh, that's a little loud. Sorry. I'm interested to hear what the rest of the speaker has to say. So can I do that without just by asking?
I think so.
Yeah. So Mr. Light, I'd like to hear the rest of and the reason I'd like to hear your argument is that I had focused at least on the 9 criteria, and I'm not as familiar with the AC1 and all these rules. So I'd like to hear what you have to say, so then we can ask staff about it.
Yeah, understood. So I think those points were covered, but again, I think there seems like there's a reasonable opportunity for these uses that would otherwise be covered under live entertainment as a secondary use, but just not a secondary use as currently written for a live performance venue, which it just feels like that is the purpose of a live performance venue. The last thing I would just say is around, I know one of the criteria is financial hardship. While the property, we won't pretend the property creates a financial hardship, it doesn't. But the limitation of these uses does create a financial hardship for the ACC as an operator. And if they can't, and we already saw that with Southern Rep, if they're not permitted to do the full range of what a performance venue can do, they can't pay rent. And then that does become a financial hardship on the property. So while it's indirect, I do still see that there is this potential meeting of that criteria. Thank you, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you. I have one more card. Troy Folks.
Hello, thank you for your time. My name is Trey Folks, 1810 Hastings Place. I run a nonprofit workforce development called Turning Tables. We are in partnership with the Andrew Caillou Center to be a vendor for the space and to be in community of practice with them, which means we fully support them being an incubator for everything that's happening in the neighborhood. We are already in community with some of the businesses in the neighborhood as a consultant, working with them outside of that space. So we see that space as an opportunity to build more community and more opportunities for our students that go through our program and create more real opportunity for the workforce development program, as well as a space to bring in more income for the Andrew Caillou Center through experiences outside of what is traditional performance. So we're in fully support of them as a community building space. And that is our main purpose for being with the Andrew Caillou Center.
Thank you. Those are all the cards that I have. Are there any questions for staff?
I do. I just recall when this came before us, there was concern from the neighborhood that this would expand to beyond the hours and the uses that I see described here. So when I read the staff report, I wasn't surprised that there was a recommendation of denial just based on the intensity of what is proposed here. And I have no doubt the operators here would do a great job, and that have, cultivating local culture and music is wonderful. But I have to go back to the loosening of the uses, the hours, and the permission of alcohol to what they are asking for as something that we contemplated a few years ago on this very thing. And it's unfortunate that nonprofit or didn't succeed because of a pandemic. But I would like the staff's commenting on the expansion, which is way beyond what we recommended with the first conditional use.
Yeah, I don't recall exactly that previous conversation in 2018. I will say that the overlay district is intentional in what it allows and what it doesn't allow. The overlay district is applied not only along Broad, but also Frenchman and parts of St. Bernard. And I think, certainly along Frenchman, there's a desire to limit the intensity of performance. But St. Bernard and the Broad Street corridors are within that same bucket, and there's the overlay definitely is intentional in limiting the subset of performance types that are allowed there.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I have a follow-up question, if I could. Where is the I'm not clear on the limitation to plays and musicals. Is that stated under AC1? Is that part of the AC1 that says live entertainment or live performance but limited to plays and musicals?
Yeah, so in the permitted uses section, it says, in addition to all this stuff that's otherwise normally allowed, you can also do this list of things, and live performance venue is one of them. And then a little bit farther down the page, there are a set of use standards for live performance venues in particular. And that's where the statement is limiting them to plays and musicals and limiting the alcohol service component.
So that's a matter of the text.
Right.
So that would take a text change to allow.
To eliminate it across the entire overlay, yes, the text change would be required. To waive it specifically for this property, there'd have to be a finding
Right.
that the 9 criteria are satisfied.
Are other activities like comedic performances, dance classes, poetry readings, is that specifically identified as a category?
So that, those activities fall within the live performance in general, but the overlay district allows only the subset
I see.
of all of it limited to plays and musicals.
So, Dr. Vander was talking about, comedians and like we're saying, dance and music classes. Those, is there a middle ground to go to here without expanding it to all night amplified music parties with alcohol served, which is what is being proposed here, which I think was the original concern with the limitation, is that
I think what you could do is, the zoning ordinance allows this range of things within the live performance definition. The overlay narrows what's allowed here. You could say plays, musicals, stand-up comedy, XYZ. So basically you're broadening it slightly, but not the full range. And then I think on the hours of operation piece, you'd have to tie that in with the alcohol sales, I believe, because that's kind of the scope of the application. So the request is alcohol sales 4 to midnight, Tuesday through Thursday, for the one on Friday, 2 p.m. to midnight on Saturday, 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. on Sunday. So that's kind of the outer limits of, I think, what could be allowed. You could allow within that range.
But I guess my question is, one does not go hand in hand. We can do one without the other. We could say expanding the use to, as they would like, comedians, dance classes, music classes, but continue with the restriction on alcohol.
That's correct. You could.
Okay.
And
Okay. Well,
and
that's
what-
where I was going to go with my motion, if allowed. So because I see that if you loosen the use, I don't have a problem with that. But when you marry that with the other things here, it turns into something that was contemplated and worried about, before when we went through this and we had neighbor opposition. So I don't know that, I don't have a problem with what was discussed by the applicant, except for the alcohol. And is there a way, like if there's, I guess, if they wanted a DJ with, amplified music contained within the walls, if it would just have to comply with the noise ordinance.
Yeah, so if it's helpful, I can list the things that are in the live performance venue definition. So it's musical acts, theatrical plays or acts, stand-up comedy, magic, dance clubs, and disc jockey performances. So you can allow, all of those, fewer a subset of those, but that's kind of the range.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
When was the neighbor complaints, when was that reported?
I don't know specifically. I recall back when this first came up for its original condition. Yeah.
2018.
Yeah.
Clearly since then, the use of that space has changed considerably, since COVID, but since the last operator, and now this is a new operator that's asking for a completely new set of uses. I don't know if I'm very familiar with that area because I do frequent that area since it's a upcoming cultural district in our city. And I think one of the things when something is in good hands and we need to give them support to actually grow and become a proper venue for the performances that they're suggesting. I'm not sure if I got the impression that you were going to have DJs and dance parties. I got the impression that you were going to do live performances and musicals and plays and such. So that is not the impression that I got, and I would like for you to clarify that point. But as far as I'm concerned, as far as my motion in terms of seeing this cultural district grow, I feel strongly about denying the staff's report and voting to approve this project.
Dr. Vander, can you come up to the podium, please?
Can I ask a quick question in the interim? Just, Mr. Kroll, what's the legal mechanism? Commissioner Brown's motion is apparently to expand, as you just said, we could expand to include comedy, et cetera, et cetera. What's the legal mechanism to do that? Is it a text change? Is it the variance, or is it something else?
I mean, so if you believe the 9 criteria and that you would do a modified approval to approve the request to loosen the restrictions to allow plays, musicals, X, Y, and Z, and potentially deny the request for broadened hours of operation if that's the intent.
Is there another legal
The other legal
mechanism
would be to do a text amendment to modify the regulations of the overlay district as they apply to every property.
Right, but we can't do that sitting here because there hasn't been an application for a text amendment, hadn't been public notice, et cetera.
That's right.
Okay.
One other quick comment, the complexion of that particular neighborhood has also changed. There's several restaurants and bars that have opened up on that street. They have regular markets and music and whatnot on the street, all the way from Bayou Road, all the way to Pagoda House. So it's a very lively kind of atmosphere. Yeah, so it's very different, you know. But yes, I would like for you to clarify exactly what you were going to use, the use.
So when we say things such as comedies, it's a comedy showcase. So it's a once a month. And that's literally to allow comedians to get together, to curate their show, and then to have it in the building. And so it's not a nightly, weekly thing, right? The other thing is because we do have we have dance classes. We're serving community. We have instructors who are actually professors at universities who are teaching, just to make these opportunities, these types of experiences available to the community, not simply people who are already identified with access and particular spaces, if you will. The other thing is, for us, I'm hearing the commentary about DJs. We've not had DJs and dance parties. If we were to do something like that, chances are it is an event where we're having a conversation, because one of the things we're doing at the Andre Caillou Center is asking the community to come in and have conversations with us about critical issues that we're facing. So when you're talking about the changing demographics of Bayou Road and what's happening on Bayou Road, what we've been able to do is literally invite the community in, not simply Bayou Road, but the larger New Orleans community, to come in and have a conversation about what we're experiencing, what are we dealing with. We're literally creating space to create community and to support community. So if we were, thinking about music, chances are you're playing music to literally just set the tone, to ease people into where we've come into a space, it's relaxing, and we're waiting to have this conversation, or we're waiting to see something. But the DJ in and of itself, that is not what we are doing. We're really promoting live music. And I want to be clear about that. The other thing is, I want to address thoughts about the turning tables. We have continuously confronted the language of bar. Turning Tables is a training it's a nonprofit as we are. It's a training organization that was established to literally cultivate predominantly Black and brown talent to work in hospitality, but work in hospitality in leadership positions that they don't often have access to. So that is what Turning Tables is doing. When we're asking for the expansion of bar sales or alcohol sales, we're not operating a traditional bar. We're literally operating a space where students are coming in to learn how to professionally work in an environment. And we're typically curating programs where we're complementing what is happening on the stage or on either of our stages to what is happening at the bar. For example, and I've used this when we did the NPN meeting with the neighborhood. If we produce a play that's set in a particular time period where some type of food or beverage is referenced, Mr. Folks literally has the skill sets and the knowledge to curate and cultivate a beverage that now allows the audience to also experience that narrative and that time period as well. When we're asking for the expansion on the time, it's also so that when the performance ends, the experience doesn't automatically end, but that because he is nationally known, he's modest, but he's nationally known for his skills. He would then be able to carry through with a program in that area to now have a conversation about spirits, about the culture of the times and whatnot. So we are not asking for considerations to operate what you think is a traditional bar. That is not what we are doing. That is not the Andre Caillou Center, and that is not why we selected Turning Tables. We selected him because we have mission alignment, particularly when it comes to Black and Brown. Having access to opportunities in the city. I wanted to, just clarify that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
Are there any other questions or motion?
Am I able to add one other clarification?
Can you do it in 30 seconds?
Yep. I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Brown. I remember I was the one who was here in 2018, so I remember what you're referencing. So we have one homeowner. If you can picture the property, there's the former church and then a parking lot, and then there's a house on Columbus Street behind it. So we've worked a lot with that homeowner to mitigate any potential impacts from addressing AC noise or addressing other things. You have to remember, this is about indoor performances. This is not outdoor, right? If there's anything happening outdoor, that's a special event permit. That is not what you're considering right now. And so for us, the focus really is on the really strong support from Bayou Road and that community.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess my motion is consistent with the staff's report in everything except for expanding the venue's use to dance classes, music classes, comedy shows, lectures. And I don't know why that would be necessary, because those actually seem less intense, but and it seems like DJ is not necessary because that's not what's contemplated here. And I think that is probably would be the most impactful anyway. So but I think that the alcoholic beverage service should stay only because of the size of the venue, because it is so large. And it's not just homeowners or residences. It was businesses around there too that were concerned about the size of that serving alcohol beyond the hours that were in the original conditional use. And I am familiar with that area. It's great.
And since I seconded, and I think this is probably necessary, since the only way to do that today is with a variance, and variance requires compliance with 9 criteria. So I think it's worthwhile to comment that I think as modified and limited by what Commissioner Brown said, I think the 9 criteria are met. The staff report indicated that, I didn't count, but most of them, 5, 6 of them were. And I think the ones that the staff thought weren't are met in the sense that these limited changes are consistent with the uses in the neighborhood. We've heard that these are nonprofits, so I think the criteria about are they going to profit wouldn't apply. And I do think it's a hardship in that they face the conundrum of they can't be a bar or restaurant, and if they could have all the live performances. So I don't think that's going to apply throughout the neighborhood. I don't think it confers a special advantage. So I do think the 9 criteria are met. limited to what Commissioner Brown limited the expanded uses to be.
Okay, I just want to be clear that I did not, basically what I was doing was adopting the staff report. Recommend, or at least making a motion to adopt the staff report for denial of everything but the expansion to these uses.
So what I heard was, the allowable uses would be plays, musicals, stand-up comedy, dance performance. Is that correct?
Dance, music classes. And, you know, I think that keeping the, you know, the alcohol in conjunction with a play or a comedy show is accommodated in the original conditional use, and no change. I wouldn't want to see any changes made there.
Public portions closed.
Go ahead. Could I ask for clarification of the motion, the restatement of the motion? Yeah.
Okay, my motion is to accept the staff's report to deny the original, but to modify it to include the uses that the applicant requested.
This is considered a modified approval?
Yeah.
Yes.
Keeping in place all restrictions on alcohol
Keeping in place all restrictions on alcohol, so no allowance of,
and hours of operation.
wait, so.
Basically, the only change that I foresee with our recommendation, or with what I'm moving to recommend, is what they're proposing being prohibited, which is comedy shows, dance classes, music classes, and lectures.
And keeping the alcohol portion as stated in the.
Correct.
Is this am I correct in understanding? So the modification is removing the one use, which is a DJ.
Well, that's not in here. The DJ's not in here. So I wouldn't expand it to that. That's not what they wanted. And I would think that the size of this venue might lend it itself to what the neighbors were originally concerned about.
Sorry, I still don't understand the motion.
We're expanding the live performance types beyond plays and musicals, correct? And then we are maintaining, the motion is to maintain the restriction that they wanted to remove the restriction that limited sales to only 1 hour prior to an event. And they wanted to expand that to be the duration of the event. And Commissioner Brown's motion is to not allow the expansion of alcohol sales, but do allow the expansion of the definition of live performance venue types. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the reason I erred in the direction of saying adopting the staff report, because there were more things in the staff report that I wanted to keep, but if it works better to phrase it that way, that's probably much better.
Yes. So we're actually denying the staff's report and adopting the alcohol, adopting the first two. And adopting the first to expand uses.
Not to deny the staff report. Okay, let me restate this. I guess I should restate it as modified approval of the staff report, which would be keep everything in the staff report in place, only expanding the uses to music, dance classes, comedy shows, and lectures. Everything else in the staff report, I would like to see kept in place.
Including the alcohol restriction.
Yes.
I think we should discuss that. I just don't know how this business is going to be successful if we don't give them full reign. I understand the noise and the DJ restrictions, but I just don't understand how an indoor facility of what they're trying to do, something creative. We're giving them almost full reign, but not the whole thing. So I would feel more comfortable denying the staff's report and denying the staff's report and allowing and removing the restrictions and removing the alcohol restrictions for this particular. I don't know if anyone else has comments.
Yeah, I just have a question for staff. From the applicant, we heard that, I guess one of the big things as it relates to alcohol was post events. So as long as they're having a live music events, I guess they can have consumption of alcohol, but, even with those expansions in the motion that we have now, what's going to happen? Cease the live performance at that point, and there's no alcohol sales or
Yeah,
no alcohol
so
consumption?
under the rules that exist now, you can sell 1 hour before the performance starts and during the performance. So once the performance ends, there's no more alcohol sales. That's the current rule. And the amendment would be to basically allow alcohol sales within specified hours of operation.
What he's talking about. doing,
Which,
like a.
how that overlaps with what they could do now depends on
Really,
how
this
late
is always- this is the
performances
result
are
of the
occurring.
personal
I may be confusing the issue by saying that, but the point is to
no,
go
this is-
from during an hour before and during performance
this is
to allow it
specific-
basically at any time within specified hours.
So the current motion from Commissioner Brown would cease after the live performance ends.
That's my understanding of the motion.
That's correct. And basically it's keeping in place everything, but if the performance is not, the performance might include a comedy show or a lecture. And that's really the only difference I see in what I'm proposing and what the conditional use as it stands today is, which seems to be in line with what the applicant is asking for, other than the alcohol, which I don't see as necessary or appropriate.
Actually, another question, if it were recommended for approval by I know that's not the motion on the floor, but then it would essentially be the hours of allowing alcohol sales would be separate and distinct from whether or not a performance was even scheduled that night or any event was scheduled. Is that correct? Does the way that it's written, the way the request is, the application is put in, allows for alcohol sales even without any event, any.
No, I mean, I perhaps we need clarification from the applicant on their intent, but my understanding is that on days when there are performances, alcohol sales could occur during these certain times.
Okay, only on days when they're performing. Could you clarify that? Is that correct? Yes, okay. Yes, that's correct.
Is this on deadline?
It is not on deadline. It could be deferred.
Does deferring change anyone's point of view?
I appreciate the motion from Commissioner Brown. Just hearing this, I think we're moving a lot further from what the anticipation of what the applicant. And I think it'll probably be useful to kind of get feedback from the applicant so that they're not here while we put the motion together without necessarily input from staff on what the impacts of that may have on their business. So although we have a motion on the floor, I guess I'll be more inclined for even a deferral so that they can meet with staff and kind of discuss what we're talking about now before pressing forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Stewart. Would you be amenable to that? Dr. Vander? We still have an active motion. Okay. Is there any further discussion? Right now, this says motion to defer. You should change it to the motion that's for modified approval. Okay, let's vote on machines for Commissioner Brown's modified approval. Okay. So the motion failed. Looking for another motion?
If there's no other motions, I'll move for deferral until Stephen will be appropriate time, based on the schedule. 2 meetings?
I mean, it's up to you. We could do either. I'll say that the content of the staff report is probably not going to change dramatically, but we could capture what the motion was, and perhaps 2 weeks, I think we could make it work, and that would give people time to mull over what's been discussed here.
Okay, if the applicant is in favor, just wave your hand. Well, I'll move to defer for 1 meeting, the next meeting.
I think that's reasonable. I just don't, think we have enough right in here to vote on I don't see the staff report changing, and unless we have an opportunity for neighbors to come and speak about it because they weren't aware that this staff report was not final, they might have, we might hear from some neighbors. That might be helpful. So I'll support it, but I have what I need to vote today.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Do I have a second? Motion by Commissioner Stewart, seconded by Commissioner Lunn. Is there any further discussion or motion to defer? That will vote. Motion to defer passes. So we'll see you at the next meeting. Next is zoning docket 2923.
Zoning docket 2923 is a conditional use request to permit alcohol beverage sales for on-premises consumption in an existing standard restaurant. The property is located at 3814-3816 Magazine Street in an HUB1 Historic Urban Neighborhood Business District, which permits standard restaurants by right. However, the property is also located within the Magazine Street Use Restriction Overlay District, which requires conditional use approval for alcohol beverage sales in existing standard restaurant, if not already permitted by a conditional use. Alcohol service is a normal part of a full-service restaurant's operation and is not going to change this business operation in a meaningful way. The proposed use is consistent with the general purpose and intent of the zoning district regulations and the master plan. The staff recommends approval of zoning docket 029-23, subject to 2 provisos.
Thank you. I don't have any cards for this zoning docket. Are you here to speak? Please come up. You can just fill out a card later. State your name and address.
I apologize, Madam Chairman. I neglected to fill out a card. Chris Young on behalf of Dakar NOLA LLC. As Sabine, I think that's who was speaking, noted, this is an existing operating restaurant that is seeking to sell alcohol or offer alcohol at their establishment. In my humble opinion, from a planner's perspective, this is about as good as it gets, especially on Magazine Street. This is a 30-seat, again, existing operating restaurant, reservation only, and only 1 seating a night, and they're open from Wednesday to Sunday. So they only have 30 people coming to that restaurant on any given night. With some, they are trying to do some stuff on Wednesdays and Sundays that are open to the public, like a shorter menu, but this is generally a reservation only establishment. There is no holding bar. So it's not, we don't have that issue. And of course, the parking issue is limited. We held an MPP meeting, 8 neighbors showed up, all in support. There was one neighbor, I believe, who was representing perhaps one of the neighborhood associations who communicated by email, and her major concern was, how does the conditional use affect the property? Does it go with the property? Does it go with the business? How can it be rescinded? And we explained all that to her. Of course, I tried to push her to Stephen, I guess, mostly because, I mean, I don't speak on behalf of the commission. or the staff, I was trying to explain to her that it can be rescinded. Here are the rules that regulate rescission, but really she should seek an answer from the staff. And I'm not sure if she ever did, but I think we answered her question adequately. But what is coolest about this proposal is that the owner. The owner is James Bearded nominated, up and coming, in my opinion, already culinary royalty, 28-year-old from Senegal, the country, West Africa. And Dakar, of course, or maybe not, of course, is the capital of Senegal. He wanted to be here today, he and his partner, and I have a very brief statement that he wrote, and I would like to read it to the commission. He apologizes for not being here, but this is why he's not here. Please extend our apologies to the New Orleans City Planning Commission for our absence. The reason we're unable to be present is that we were presented with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that we could not turn down. Chef Serene and Decola Nola were hand-selected to curate the closing dinner for the 21 CEO guests of the World 50 Leaders, Coaching Leaders New York retreat on April 26th, which of course is tomorrow in New York. World 50 is an invite-only CEO, board C-suite, I don't know what all that means, and executives from the global 1,000 top companies. To name a few, executives from Entergy, Wells Fargo, AT&T, Citigroup, Vanguard, and United will be in attendance. As underrepresented minorities in the business sector, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to present our brand could not be missed. We thank you, the City Planning Commission, for reviewing our application and hope we're able to continue shedding favorable light on the city of New Orleans and positively impacting its economy.
Thank you.
I'll answer any questions.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Staff or a motion?
Move approval in accordance with staff recommendation.
Thank you. Commissioner Sieg made a motion for approval, seconded by Commissioner Stewart. You can vote your machines. Okay. Yeah.
I vote yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Motion passes. Best of luck. Thank you. Next is subdivision docket 1823.
Here, subdivision docket 1823 is a subdivision request for the property at 6231 through 33 Laurel Street and 517 Calhoun Street. Policy B subdivisions must be considered by the City Planning Commission in cases where the subdivision proposal does not clearly comply with all of the requirements contained within the subdivision regulations. This subdivision does not comply with section 552, which requires side lot lines to run at a right angle to the front property line as closely as practicable. The proposal does not comply with this regulation due to the T shape of lot A1. The commission has in the past allowed for some deviation from the strict application of section 552. For example, the commission and staff have in recent years allowed for lots with a minor L shape, referring to lots with where the dogleg of the lot extends from the large rectangular portion less than 15% of the main portion of the lot. In this case, the dogleg is about 62% of the size of the main portion of the lot. Thus, the shape is not permissible under that rule. Therefore, based on this analysis, the proposal, this analysis of the proposal against the subdivision regulations, the staff must recommend denial of the request.
Thank you. I have two cards. Leslie Davis.
Hello, I'm Leslie Davis. I live at 517 Calhoun and also am the property owner of the 6233 Laurel Street property. So we own both of these properties. We've owned the larger property 517 since Katrina. We own another property 2 doors down where my 89-year-old mother-in-law lives, and my sister-in-law and brother live next door where the dog leg would go around. So we basically, the whole family has that corner. We're getting older. We've lived in the neighborhood since our 30s. We're both now in our 60s, and we hope to be here for another, well, based on my mother-in-law, probably another 40 years. So we're hoping to be able to downsize from the 517 property and live in the smaller double, which is the Laurel Street property. And it is a double. We're renovating it right now to maintain it to be a double. We will live in one side and rent out the other. There's no off-street parking. We've had several break-ins with cars that do not have off-street parking. And the street on Laurel has also flooded 3 times in the last couple of years, as everybody's aware. So we've usually had to have our tenants move cars. One of our tenants had their car flooded in the first flood, and now everybody moves their car to higher ground. So we're really hoping to be able to take over that T shape in the back. And we're hoping that council can make a variation, which I guess there's been acceptance before of changing from that 1950s regulation of everything being an I shape and making it into a T. Again, mostly this is for safety and for off-street parking for a double.
Thank you.
Can I ask the applicant a question?
Sure.
So in the part of the T that's away from Calhoun, there's a structure, there's a shed, there's a something, a garage.
It's a garage.
And then is there a curb cut from Calhoun leading to that? How do you get to that garage?
Yeah, it's right now, it's a big driveway. It used to be the driveway for Graffinino's Tavern. And so that whole area there is already a driveway. We'd basically just be splitting it in half and maintaining off-street parking for 517 and then making parking for the double at Laurel,
So, okay, so.
including the garage. Yeah, so that little piece is the garage over there. So that whole line is driveway in the front that ends up in the garage.
Right, so how would that serve both properties?
How
So,
does it-
so that would be technically in the lot, if you were to get approval, that would be technically, my screen's so small, I can't read it.
Yeah.
That would technically be on the new lot that fronts on Laurel.
Yes. Yeah.
So, how would the Calhoun property use that?
They don't, they have their own, there's actually there's parking space in an area for parking in the front. The Calhoun lot is wide on the side as well. And then there's also there's trees, there's a palm right there in front of the stairway at Calhoun, but that's actually the width of a car. So if you like measured out the front of Calhoun, took out some of those palms, there's space for 3 vehicles and maybe 4 if
Okay.
they park right in front of that second set of stairs on the side of Calhoun.
So I'm looking at,
Yep.
colleague has given me a nice big
Yes,
screen.
that's the
So you
current
have
driveway.
42 feet front on Calhoun. Still, if you get your re-subdivision.
Yeah.
So you would park basically on the left side if you're facing the front door
Yes.
of the property.
Yes,
Okay. And that garage would serve the garage building would serve the Laurel Street property.
correct.
Okay.
And the 517 also is a big backyard, so it still maintains a large lot. It's a large double lot. So 517 still maintains.
Do you have any other questions, Commissioner Teague? No? No other questions?
No other questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. David Garrity.
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Garrity. I live at 517 Calhoun Street. My wife was very thorough, so I think I'm gonna cut to the chase. I don't think I need to reiterate what she already said. I've been a practicing arborist in the city for the last 42 years. Like my wife Leslie said, after my mom's house was flooded, we we offered our 800 square foot house to her, which she readily took. And then we subsequently bought the house at 517, 2 doors down. And we went from 800 feet to 3,000 feet. And we want to go from 3,000 square feet back to 800 with the duplex. We're committed to the neighborhood. We're not going to sell. Also, like my wife said, we're getting ready to retire. And we would like to just be secure and feel safe in our environment. We have embraced the water garden concept also and have removed excess concrete from all the properties and replaced it with decomposed granite. So we're trying to help the neighborhood drain properly. We clean the catch basins out periodically. But again, we're committed to the neighborhood and we're not going to sell. We would like the off-street parking. We would like, or I'm not sure if the terminology is a variance or another term, but we have the property and would like to have the off-street parking. And I want to thank you all again for having us. Thank you.
And I have one more question for you.
Yes, sir.
Or actually two. The garage we just talked about with your wife, and the driveway. Right now, you all use the driveway for Calhoun.
Yes.
So-
Yes.
And you're just trying to switch it to Laurel.
Yes,
Okay. And is the driveway the permeable granite you just talked about?
it is.
Okay,
The-
thank you.
The front part of it, if you see, is the large Belgian blocks that were in the city. And in my career in working with trees, I've worked on a lot of street projects around the city, and those Belgian blocks were going to be paved under in front of the old warehouse music venue, and they were offered to me, and we built the driveway out of them.
Cool.
And beyond that is the decomposed granite.
Thanks. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Are there any other questions to the applicant or staff? Or a motion?
I have a motion. So I'm going to move for approval rather than staff recommendation for denial. And my reasoning is, first of all, I think the reasons are compelling: flooding and safety and parking. And second, the driveway and garage is already being used. So it's no worse on the neighborhood. It's just now going to be used for a different house. And then in the end, since they're going to park on the Calhoun property, otherwise, it gets more cars off the street. And so I don't see any harm, and I see a lot of benefits. So I move for approval.
I'll second Kelly Brown.
Thank you. Commissioner Stieg made motion for approval, seconded by Commissioner Brown. Is there any discussion? Now we'll call the question.
And I'm going to do a verbal vote again. For yes.
Motion passes. Best of luck to you. Next is subdivision docket 4023.
Good afternoon. Subdivision docket 4023 is a request, is being reviewed according to Article 5, Section 5.1.8, which is reversal of lot frontage that states that sidelines of a lot shall run in right angles to the street of which it faces as far as practicable. The regulations state that the commission will look with disfavor upon proposals for reversal of lot frontages that will result in required rear yards abutting required side yards or vice versa. In this case, the application represents a reversal in lot frontage from Carondelet Street to Constantinople Street for proposed lot X1E. Additionally, proposed lots X1A through X1D will have rear yards abutting the side yard of a proposed lot X1E. Policy B, approval criteria per subdivision regulation, section 3.2.2 is that no lot is reduced in area below the minimum lot size required by the zoning ordinance. The new condition creates a general improvement of the original plat by increased lot width, et cetera, although the proposed lots may be slightly below the minimum lot dimensions and or standards which are required in this regulations. Improvements exist upon the property attending the original adoption of the subdivision regulations in 1950. From the perspective of the subdivision regulations, the proposal will represent no significant difference over the existing condition. The applicant makes this request allow for the creation of 5 smaller compliant lots out of the 1 existing larger lot. Currently, lot X1 is oriented towards Carondelet Street with a rear yard abutting a neighboring side yard. With the proposed development, the lots created X1A, X1B, X1C, and X1D will have rear yards abutting the side yard of the new lot X1E, which will be oriented towards Constantinople Street. The resulting configuration is consistent with the surrounding lot pattern, as proposed lots X1A through X1D facing Carondelet Street will be oriented in a similar manner to other neighboring lots that face Carondelet Street, while X1E will align with the orientation of other nearby lots which face Constantinople Street. Due to this consistency, the proposal is sufficiently acceptable to be found in compliance with policy B, and staff recommends approval of SD 4023.
Thank you. I don't have any cards for this subdivision docket. Is there any questions for staff or a motion?
I move for approval.
Motion by Commissioner Stewart, second by Commissioner Steve. No questions, we'll vote on machines.
Commissioner Brown votes yes.
Motion passes. Our last item is subdivision ratifications.
Can I just interject a clarification on that? I don't know that the motion included 2 provisos. Does it include?
Yes.
Yes.
Supervisor as well.
And then finally, the subdivision ratifications are a list of subdivisions that we believe are eligible for administrative approval, and you as a commission would be certifying that decision.
Looking for a motion.
Move approval.
You. Seconded by Commissioner Stewart.
Yes.
What's your machines? Subdivision ratifications approved. That concludes our business for today. Looking for a motion for dismissal.
No.
Yes. Move to adjourn.